So I want to ask you about your marriage. So you live in New York City with your husband. So if I picture that in my mind, isn't that the Carrie Bradshaw dream come true? And so how did you two meet? And based on your book, can we assume that you two had an amazing wedding yourself?
If Carrie and Mr. Big were committed before they moved to New York City, and if the government did not recognize marriage between sex columnists and billionaires, and if they spent 16 years of their lives fighting and waiting for their marriage to be recognized, yes, then it would be a Sex and the City story.
It would be just like that. Okay.
Yeah. But we met in '92. We were in college. We were 16. It was like Don't Ask, Don't Tell, DOMA 90s, and there was a lot of shame. It was pre-Glee, and we had a major falling out. The dean told him not to talk to me. I mean, it was awful, awful, awful. But again, I saw him on MTV, on The Real World, and 6 years later, and I wrote him a kind of love letter, and I thought he was talking about me on the show, and so I was a little narcissistic, and I wrote this letter, and we started dating, and 6 months later, I found out he wasn't talking about me. But 16 years later, no, he wasn't. But we've been, it says that there's something to be said for being wrong about these things 16 years later, which is something I write about in my book. So that's our story, and we got married quite a few times in the past 16 years. So I'm glad now we don't have to do that anymore. We're just unequivocally husbands.
No more wedding planning, I see.
No. As far as perfect wedding, no, I mean, the whole point of my book is just really to spend as little money as possible and to make choices that are meaningful, that you're telling a story. It goes back to Kennedy's point again about autonomy and choice, and we're at a point where the couple and the couple's story takes precedence over tradition, which doesn't mean there can't be traditional elements that are meaningful to you in the ceremony, but the priority is the couple's individuality and truth, and ours was on a budget, $20,000 in Stockbridge, in
wow.
England in the fall, in October. So that tells you about the kinds of corners we had to cut and just the decisions that we made, which were all very meaningful. There was we created a lot of stuff ourselves, and our moms made the centerpieces, and it ended up being a very personalized theatrical event. And I think that's really what people want, because that's what you take away with you for the rest of your lives together, those memories.